Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Lakehart, and Lou and I work for Trees for Seattle. I'll tell you a little bit more about our program in a minute, but we kind of wanted to kick it off. Um, I do want to say, Lou has been in this work. Lou, how long have you been an arborist?
1986 is when I
Okay,
started working in urban
a
forestry
long time.
after, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm rather newer to the field, but I've been doing this for a long time. And um, you know, I feel really grateful to work in urban forestry. And I also have done a lot of urban forest and kind of like rural forest restoration. And so it's interesting to come into this really highly urban landscape and then having known trees in kind of a different space. And then I feel like right now I'm constantly learning more, especially when it comes to pests and climate change. And I think that all of us are seeing drastic change. This is why we're here, right? This is why Joey's doing some of the studies that he's doing and the community science projects, just trying to get data so we understand the breadth of our problems. And so, Lou and I talk a lot about pests, honestly. Um, and this is one that I feel like we've come to know. Um, you know, it's an interesting thing. I actually looked it up in our first instance that I could see of folks writing about it in the media was actually in 2019, and at that point, according to Crosscut, it was already a foregone conclusion that our birches will probably likely die in the city. And so that was kind of interesting to when we were doing this research. But if you are new to this pest, I want to say like neither of us are entomologists, but we have had some experience with this insect, and definitely I know done some research, and you'll kind of get to see. We have an intern that's done some research, but we can't answer a lot of those like super specific entomological questions, but happy to do some more practical applications. So I think the important thing to note, like some big things about birch borer, they are native. They are native to North America, but to the States. And they are about a little half-inch long, bronzy, iridescent, kind of beautiful, we both were saying, bug insect. They love sun, so when it's warm like this, they're out and about, although they're kind of hard to see, but they can be seen. If you're going to see them, it's now. So summertime, full sunny days. I'm not sure. I know there's people from all over the region, but right now it's sunny in Seattle. So this would be the time to be seeing them moving about. Um, and I just want to say, like, some of you might know about this if you lived in the East Coast. East Coast has been dealing with this insect for a long time, but there are reports of huge birch die-off and from 1800s, 1900s in Canada and the US. And, a lot of those followed logging and then birch forests kind of coming back to successional forests. But this pest has been with us a long time. What we know about it, though, is that, stressed, drought stressed, or diseased trees, they actually emit chemicals that attract the insect. And so a stressed tree is less likely to survive an attack. And stress trees actually are calling in these insects. And so that's kind of important when we think about the urban landscape. When we talk about birches and other spaces, they might be able to prevent some of this. So kind of in the picture here, we have a larva and an adult, and that larva, their eggs are laid under the bark. Eggs hatch and larvae actually tunnel into the phloem of the tree. So like many of our insects, they create it's like if you got a hole in your straw and you're trying to drink out of the bottom of your glass, and if you've got holes in your straw, it doesn't work as well, right? So it's the same type of thing. They're really interrupting some of that pressure that's needed to move nutrients and water throughout the tree. But a healthy tree can actually grow calluses to prevent those larvae from from coming out of the bark. But the insects molt and overwinter in the tree. That's kind of when that callusing should happen. But a diseased tree, a stressed tree, is less likely to be able to do that. And then the larvae actually pupate there and emerge kind of like right now. Probably it already happened. So late April, early May, kind of depends with this hot weather. I'm assuming they've been, moving about. And so this is a graphic. I'm happy, to send these slides to Joey so people can see it. But this is a graphic that it's hard to digest right now, but it's great to see when you have a minute. And it really kind of shows you the life cycle of the birch borer, throughout the year. So, for us, what we are talking to mostly, we talk to mostly residents. That's kind of our job in the city, is to be that conduit to other departments, because there are 9 who deal with urban forestry in Seattle. But also Lou and I just answer a lot of like technical questions and support folks when they've got this on the right. They've got that really kind of characteristic birch tree that what looks like kind of a skeleton sprouting out of a nice thick crown. The crown is now moved down the tree. I've heard people say that, like, oh, it used to be up high and now it's, further down the tree. So crown dieback. If you have binoculars or if you're really sharp-eyed, you might see some D-shaped holes in the tree. Actually, I have a photo of this in a second. And so, that crown dieback is the symptom, and then the signs of the insect are actually kind of lesser signs. Like we really, in this, unfortunately, are most likely to see symptoms. Like when we see that crown dieback, that's mostly when people notice that they have an issue. The actual, and those are 2 different things. Like the symptoms are like what happens to the tree, how it's declining, and the signs are like the actual signs that an insect is present. That the tree will actually kind of swell or bump. That's some of that callousing that's trying to happen. It's trying to kind of shut off those infested pieces of itself. So those are possible. And, there's all sorts of actually other signs once you take the tree down. There's like galleries that exist. But, for us, when we're talking to the general public, when to call an arborist, it's like, oh, if you start to see some of that decline at the very top of your tree, that call now. And if you're seeing those D-shaped holes, as you can see in this picture, we really are, Lou and I were talking about this, and I'll let him say his opinions if he wants to, but just about, at this point, kind of our biggest thing is like removal, and getting, infested trees kind of out of the landscape quickly. Although, that's really expensive often. And so, I think that's why we see a lot of folks not able to, or unwilling to, or, unable to take out infested trees. But it's, of course, really important if there are several planted. And we're really thinking in yard spaces, but of course, this is true in a park or any other space. And so, this is kind of characteristic. These are like, this is a bad situation. If you've got these visible holes, if you've got this level of crown dieback, there are, you can easily search it. There's US Forest Service sites that kind of give you the stages, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So this is pretty advanced crown dieback in the photo there.
The tree on the right looks just like the one up the street from me, which I've told these neighbors that they need to remove the tree, and they just haven't done it. Also, I'll just quickly mention, you will see D-shaped exit holes on young trees, especially like a lot of the young Himalayan birches that have been planted, because they're, low enough to the ground where when the insect attacks, you will see. So look at some of those young Himalayan birches and you'll probably see the holes.
So this is kind of, we were saying, it's ideal that the tree is felled and removed kind of early in the cycle, like before April, May, so those insects aren't moving around, and finding other host trees. But it's what we recommend to folks is always, like, if you've got a significant amount of crown dieback, that we just ask folks to remove it as early as they are able. And that's simply, to hopefully stop the spread as much as we possibly can. Although, it's, I hate to be, I actually really love birches. I have a family connection to some space in in Montreal, kind of north there, and there's huge birch forests there, and they're gorgeous. And I love them. And also, I understand the aesthetics of why people plant them. I understand the emotional connection that people have to them. But I'll show you in the next slide. We're really, just really trying to encourage people to move away from the highly susceptible species and really move into planting resistant birches, and they do exist, in case you didn't know. But the suggestion is more than 30% crown dieback, remove tree. That's probably, you could be more conservative with that. There is an ability, we were talking about, there are abilities to treat the tree. There's insecticide sprays, there's systemic soil drenches, but in Seattle, we really don't recommend those. All of the sprays are toxic to bees, so they're really bad for all of our native pollinators. And then we also don't want those chemicals to wash into streams and creeks. A lot of birches they like wet. So a lot of them are closer to some of our creeks if they are natural, like in our parks landscape or other places. But just in general, like, of course, everything we do, most of our systems in Seattle are draining. Our stormwater is draining into urban creeks. And so we just really want to make people have that connection. Like, if you're going to make that decision to use that insecticide, it is going to end up in our urban creeks. And, thinking about all of those benthic macroinvertebrates and all of those literal bugs that live in the water, can be harmful for those as well. So, for us, this is kind of a replacement strategy at this point. There are things that we can do, for encouraging appropriate planting. We talked about the fact that stress trees, that's a bad thing. So reminding people that some birches do like cool, moist shade. So planting them in, they like some sun for sure, but planting them, not in like the dead middle of a yard without anything around them. Really encouraging people to have good soil health. So we do a lot of mulching. We've actually increased our mulching events, making sure that people have access to mulch, not just the one time they receive a tree from us. And Lou's going to talk about our program. Encouraging appropriate watering. We're talking about watering all the time now. We do have a 5-year recommended window. So that's where we have a tree establishment period of 5 years here now. And so encouraging people to water at least twice a week. And that is for the entirety of the summer. And so Lou actually lets people know if they're part of our program when to water. But, for others, we just say, like, as soon as it gets hot. If you're giving your dogs outside water, if you're giving yourself a lot of water outside, you need to be giving your trees water. And then there are borer resistant species. Unfortunately, some of the most highly prized or beautiful birches to some people are those Himalayan white birch, European white birch that you see throughout the landscape. And those are highly susceptible to the bronze birch borer. Paper birch is a more moderate, but in my neighborhood, I live in South Seattle, and just in our blocks, like almost all, we actually had a bunch of paper birch that I think were kind of really, they're probably like nearing the end of their life, but still they've all had to come out in the past few years due to birch borer. So probably just depends on where they're planted and how lovingly they're cared for, those paper birch. But through our program, we actually are planting river birch, really focused on that. Gray birch on some places you'll see it. This is moderate. Some places you'll see it as resistant. But here, this is from U.S. Forest Service, so I just included it here. And I honestly I have a river birch in my yard and through our program, and really love it. It still has nice peely bark. It has a little more color. But anyway. And this is the graphic I was speaking of. I just wanted to show it because our intern made this. She was focused on doing some education and about pests. And so this will be available if anybody wants to use it. And just please include the credit. Lou actually drew all of these herself, which is amazing. And the other thing that she did in her program, and I just wanted to point it out, is that, she really looked at our race and social equity indexes and then this isn't specific to bronze birch borer, I just want to say that, but we looked at bronze birch borer and a few other trees that we know are susceptible, including ash. And what you notice is there are some places in Seattle that have lower canopy. We do have vulnerable populations. We know we have some they have lower health outcomes in those neighborhoods, and they have a lot of trees of the canopy they do have. A lot of those trees are likely to be be susceptible to pest infestation that we know that are coming. So it's just something for city planning to know that we really need to be intentional and focusing on these neighborhoods with lots of birch, with lots of ash, and other highly susceptible trees. So I'm going to hand it over to Lou, but yes, we work for the Trees for Seattle program. We both work for the city. We do have some awesome partners in this work. Dirt Corps is one of our partners, University of Washington Botanic Gardens. We do kind of like volunteer restoration and tree care in places other than parks in this city. We do a lot of tree chats with folks like that are even just emails all the way up to presentations like this, but we talk a lot about pests. We do have a social media presence on Instagram and Facebook, and then we have our Trees for Neighborhood program.
Super. Well, hey, Allie, are you going to be advancing slides for me by chance?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Excuse me. Oh, I'd just like to add something about treatment. I have some experience, sadly, when I was working back in New York and in Chicago in the late 80s. We did treatments, and a lot of them were systemic, and yet they're still pretty toxic. One in particular was an injection in the trunk called Biodrin, and it would go up into the trunk. It's systemic, but there were some dead birds at a property where we did this treatment, and it's a suspicion that they were pecking on the trees and got into it. And as well, the systemic nature of that pesticide also means that they're still dangerous to bees who would be, visiting the pollen and the flowers on the birch trees. So there was a question I saw about systemic treatment. And if you really need to do it and the trees of high value, it's a consideration. But after all my years of experience with this, I find that if you get to a certain point, it's not worth it. You can prolong the tree's life for a couple of years, and then what happens is that you're coming back as a tree company and you're removing the tree after finally it just can't keep up with the infestation. So that's my little opinion on that, and I think they do differ amongst arborists, and that's okay. So the Trees for Neighborhoods program, we plant 1,000 free trees a year with Seattle residents, schools, churches, businesses. It's awesome. About 250 of those are street trees every year. And then Seattle City Light actually funds us to help plant 300 Powerline approved trees every year. So, and those are trees that mature at a height of 30 feet or less. So they can be planted under high voltage wires, which is wonderful. We also supply watering bags and mulch for people when they get their trees. And we also have field evaluations that we do every year of the street trees because we can't get into people's properties. But we look at the street trees and evaluate their survival for the first 2 years. And then we also have a cohort year that lasts for 10 years. And our 2-year survival rate is about 96%. And our 10-year survival rate is 90%, which is really good. And the reason for this is because we train these people how to plant them properly, how to water them and care for them. And so these are big factors in the survival. Allie, if you could advance the slide, please. And so one of the other things that's really helpful too is that we try to select trees with pest resistance. So we put a lot of effort into tree selection. We look for trees that have minimal pest problems. We use the Great Plant Picks list a lot because that's also a criteria for a great plant pick, which is something that's covers the whole Northwest Territory, west of the Cascades. And so these are plants that are easy to grow because they have minimal problems, and they're also exciting to look at, which is an important thing as well. And we try to choose good looking trees, great performers, trees that fit certain situations. So about a third of our trees are power line friendly trees. About a third of the trees we give away in a year are also conifers. And then the other third are the medium to large size deciduous trees that fit, usually in a planting strip or in your yard. We try to select trees that are adapted to our climate, and we're actually trying to look ahead, of course, and find trees that are adapted to drought. And we really need that. We have very dry summers. One thing that's key, though, and we try to tell our participants this, is that, it may be a drought-tolerant tree, but that doesn't mean you can't water it. So you do really need to water it to get it established in those first 5 years, and then that drought tolerance will kick in. We also provide tree and site selection assistance to people so that they know not to put, say, their 80-foot tall or 60-foot tall oak tree under high voltage wires or 5 feet from the foundation. And, we don't want, if we do have a dogwood, not to put it out in full sun. So these are the kind of things that we're working with people to help them make better decisions. Again, all of this leads to that great survival rate that we have. So we were just talking about this the other day, Allie and I. It is with our program, it's about quality and not quantity. Well, I think 1,000 trees a year is a pretty good quantity. I feel like, the quality is really what's important. There's, like people like, hey, why don't you, plant more trees or give away more trees? But we want to keep it so where we can manage it and make sure that we have that good survival rate. The other thing that we do, by the way, is we help people with street tree permit assistance. So we get people that street tree permit from the Seattle Department of Transportation and Urban Forestry, and that helps them quite a bit. It just eases the pain of getting trees. Tree care education, again, big part of what we do. I mentioned the right tree, right place training that we do. Our planting workshops are fantastic. I have so many people that come back to us afterwards and go, my gosh, I've been doing this for years and I didn't realize I've been doing it wrong. I've been planting my trees too deep, which we see is one of the biggest problems with tree planting, is that people bury that trunk flare. We also have pruning workshops. We have one coming up in June. We offer this to people who had trees the previous year. And so this allows them to learn about proper pruning to set their trees up for success in the future. We have partner organization presentations. So we do work with the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. We have worked with like the Northwest Horticultural Society and other folks to talk about our program and our tree care skill building at all events. It is important. We're constantly talking to people about the proper way to do things. When I send out those watering email reminders, we get a lot of emails back saying, hey, Lou, thanks for the reminder. But by the way, what's going on with my tree? Or what's this? And so we're constantly educating people, trying to get them to understand what's going on and help them through some of the difficult times to get their trees established. As far as stewardship of,
we can probably move on. Yeah. Okay. That was the same. You covered it, I feel like.
Okay, good. So the current Trees for Neighborhoods actions that we're doing, like we've gone to a full delivery model for this next agreement with our contractor, which is the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. So this will help make things easier for a lot of folks. Instead of having to come and pick up the trees at a workshop, we're going to deliver the trees to them. It's actually efficient and cost efficient, but we're still going to make sure they get that training. So we're going to have like 4 workshops scattered around the city to train everyone. They won't get delivery until they've attended a workshop. We always offer planting assistance for people who physically cannot plant the trees themselves. And we're hoping to increase that planting assistance for folks. The other thing we do is we're trying to get more trees into high heat neighborhoods. We look at the heat indexes of different neighborhoods, combine that with canopy covers in GIS, along with census tract data that shows us where the lowest incomes are, and we can and the most underserved. We can combine those three bits of data to say, let's focus on getting trees into these neighborhoods. And we can now do a weighted lottery, because the whole program is based on a lottery. You apply, your application comes in July and in August, and then what we do is we run it through a random number generator, and so it doesn't matter when you applied, everyone has an equal chance. But with the weighted lottery, we can get people in those high heat neighborhoods a greater chance of getting their trees. And yeah, there you have it.
Oh, yeah, we can say this too. I know we're kind of running out of time, but
we are. Okay.
Yeah, well, I want to give you a good amount of time. I just wanted to acknowledge that we are doing some planting and care at schools, and we'd like to offer more to folks who live in an area where it's harder for trees to grow. So some of our high heat communities, like we're able to do at schools. So we are going to have volunteer support to plant new trees, to mulch, water, and care for trees, and protect and prune trees as needed. So kind of like a 5-year establishment window. And we'd like to be able to offer this, kind of more broadly, especially for street trees. But those are things that I think will be in our future. And I just wanted to also acknowledge, I wanted to have Lou share about Trees for Neighborhoods, because it is the intent of that program is to grow canopy in the city. But as we have pests, it's increasingly becoming a tree replacement program. And all of this is a tree replacement program. This needs to be a forest, contiguous forest, right? From all the way down. But I think it's important, and we've been trying to communicate that up. And I know a lot of you are looking at funding, and maybe you're thinking about some of the big funding questions that are out there, but it's just something that we kind of keep wanting to bring up to leadership, is that, with birch borer, with, emerald ash borer on our doorstep, our 1,000 trees could go rather quickly when we have these great infestations. So, is that what we are doing? Are we trying to plant trees in a place that a tree didn't just exist? We're not just doing a 1-for-1 replacement. And so those are hard conversations. And I think sometimes it's hard to communicate that up to people who don't work in urban forestry, that it's kind of a nuance. It's a distinction. But it's something that Lou and I have been talking about too, and just kind of trying to make sure we really communicate that to those who help make those bigger decisions, about where we're going as a city with urban forestry. So, that's something we're already doing. We're doing a lot of 1-for-1 replacements, and so that's fine if that's kind of the goal of our program. But right now the goal, is also to add canopy, to get closer to our 30% goal of canopy cover across the city, and especially even higher canopy cover in neighborhoods. So that's just kind of what I wanted to share, is we don't have the answer to that yet, and maybe it would be 2 separate programs, or 2 separate where we could weight the lottery for folks of this cohort of trees that's for pest replacement. We kind of have some of the model, it's just we haven't actually been there and done it yet. And so, it's how do we not paint an abysmal picture, but paint enough of a picture of this is going to be an issue, so that, the funding dollars are there, and then the program level support is there for understanding what that might mean if we need to do pest replacement. So